Welcome to the 313 Men, Money, and Marriage podcast, the podcast where facts, logic, and reasoning are at the forefront of every conversation. I am your host, Andrew Johnson, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about the African Americans, the consumption class, and we're going to get into that here in a minute. I just want to let the audience know to say thank you to the audience, just simply for sticking with me a little bit as I took a little week off. I'm recovering from vacation, and I just didn't have a lot of time when I got back. You know, as you go on vacation, a lot of things pile up and you got to get it finished and get it done. And so that's what I was doing last week. But we did have a replay episode that is doing actually really well numbers wise. So thank you for the people who tuned into that replay episode. If there is a deficit of economically attractive men. Now, in this particular episode, we're going to be talking about African Americans, the consumption class. And I did want to talk about this. I'd been wanting to talk about this in the past, but didn't know what the right time was. And so I was thinking about it last night and I said, well, this would be maybe a good time to bring this subject matter up or talk about this particular subject. And I think it's very, very important at this moment in time, you know, that this is going. I think this is a good time to talk about this. You know, as you know, there's an election coming up and it's political and all these different things. And on this show, we don't talk about politics at all, but I just thought this would probably be a good time to discuss it. So what I'm going to first do is I want to just go over a few statistics on African Americans being a consumption class, and what are some ways that we can, you know, I won't use the word stop this from happening, but improve upon what we've been doing. And because some of these numbers might surprise you as I go through them. So don't be surprised when you hear some of these things here, because they are pretty interesting. The Black consumer spends roughly $9.4 billion on beauty products. That was based on 2023 with the numbers. We watch about 3.25 hours of television each day. That is the highest of all ethnicities. 64% of Black adults rate their financial situation negatively. And that's another issue that we're running into. And it also says we have, you know, a purchasing power of over $1 trillion. You know, that's a very high number, our purchasing power. But the typical Black family, their household income is about $45,000 a year. The reason why I wanted to bring those numbers up, and there's a couple more that I want to talk about as we go through a little bit later. Well, in a few minutes. But the reason why I want to bring these numbers up is, you know, a lot of times we talk about dating because we do promote marriage on the show. And we talk about dating. And one of the funniest things is that about when we talk about these things is the numbers that we tend to use as we're talking about dating. Whether it's a woman wanting a certain amount from the man to make, whether it's the man asking for certain things of the woman. But our numbers are so far out of whack compared to what's actually available. It's amazing to me that we throw out these numbers and we're nowhere near close to them. And so the question I always ask is, what are we doing with the money that we are making? Are people lying about how much money they're making? And just looking at the numbers, the answer has to be a resounding yes. Black shoppers account for 20% of all luxury spending. We are 6 times more likely to buy a Mercedes-Benz than a white person is. And their net worth and income is higher than ours by far. So, is this a situation where we just simply have our priorities misplaced? Where did this come from? Why do we feel the need to have to overcompensate through material items versus learning how to save, invest, and accumulate? And that's why I wanted to talk about this in this particular thing, because we were talking about what we talked about last week. Even though it was a replay episode, I thought this would be a good back into that. So I did want to mention some of these things. Where did it come from? Historically speaking, where did it come from? Well, there's a variety of different areas, but we can just start with one. And one being the biggest thing is discrimination. You know, we've always been near the bottom. You know, systemic racism and economic disparities, they influence consumption patterns. And some people might say, how is that possible? How is that possible? How can they influence consumption patterns? Well, when you never had anything before, then all of a sudden you get something, you want people to see it. You want people to see it. You want to show it off to people. Oh, I got this. A lot of times it's a false sense of security. You feel like if we buy and purchase certain things, people can't make fun of us. People can't look down upon us because we might have some of the same things that they have. And so that's where you might see some of that stuff pop up and where that comes from. However, that is not any definition of wealth. In the African American community, especially when I was growing up in New York, the big thing was clothes and cars. Clothes and cars. If you didn't have certain types of clothes and if you didn't drive certain types of cars, you were somewhat ridiculed within our community. If you didn't dress a certain way, if you didn't wear the latest, most name brand items, or if you wore a knockoff item from that name brand, people would ridicule you. And so the natural feeling and natural reaction, if you're being ridiculed as you're growing up and you're going through school, especially during those pivotal years of say 12 to 18, the second you get a job, you get some money, you're going to want to wear some of those name brand clothes just to show people that that's not who you are. So that's why I say sometimes because of these systematic racism and discrimination, we will overcompensate in an area that doesn't really matter for our long-term financial health. So we'll overcompensate by buying things that are outwardly appearance will make us look like we got money, even if we don't have any money at all. But it will look like we got it because we're dressed nice, we have a nice car, and it gives the impression, even though it may not be true, it gives the impression that we sort of have made it, in spite of all of these systematic racist things that might have gone on and the economic disparities that come with it. Now, here's the deal. Racism in and of itself is a system, and it's just a system to keep one group of people or a group of people down while another group of people benefits or goes up. And so how do you flourish in a system that is designed to keep you poor, keep you broke, keep you less than? And so a lot of times when you would hear the expression or the saying when we were growing up and I got into college age, you have to do twice as much, sometimes 3 times as much just to get even with sort of quote unquote white people. And that's what they were kind of talking about, but they weren't saying it, probably articulating it in the right way, but that's where they were going. Basically saying you have to overcome the systemic racism in order to get that equality, unless you do something really well. So you're exceptional at something. And that exceptionalism goes all throughout our community. That exceptionalism. We want people to be very exceptional at something that helps us in the dating market. It helps us in our job market. It helps us with all of these other things. Some people are not exceptional at everything. Some people might just be good at a variety of different things, which is all you need to be, because nobody's going to be exceptional at everything. But that's kind of where this whole thing starts from, is that overcoming that. And it creates a difficult situation for people to overcome. Especially if you don't have the tools and there's no mentorship or anything like that. Because like I said in the show before, they don't teach us a whole lot about money and finances in school. The need to keep up, especially in a lot of inner city schools, we do make fun of our clothes and fashion if they're not a certain name brand, and wherever you bought them from, it's like it's got to the point where I believe literally that some of this stuff, because I consider it to be a virus within our community, has led people to want to deal and sell drugs. It's led women to want to become strippers just so that they can buy these big name brand items that are liabilities and depreciate over the course of time. And that's why I call it a virus, because it literally, we put ourselves out there and we will do anything for these items that have absolutely no value. Clothes and cars, depreciation. They're hot right now, but the next year they're worthless. And so we get in this rat race where we feel like we got to keep up and got to catch up, and we show the outwardly appearance that we look like we have money. We have no assets. A lot of times we're in the red when it comes to our overall net worth because we have spent so much time purchasing all these things. Where else does this come from? I've mentioned this term on the show before, so you might have heard it before. It comes from our self-concept. And our self-concept is made up of three things. Our self-image, which is how we see ourselves, self-esteem, which is how we feel about ourselves, and our self-ideal, which is sort of the person we kind of want to be. So you wrap those three things up and you get what you call your self-concept. Now, once that is defined and you have that self-concept in place, what usually happens after the fact is the self-concept drives a lot of the decisions that you will make. So let's just go on assumption that I might have set a goal, and that goal might be, my goal this year, since women often say they want men who make six figures, is to make six figures. Say I make $100,000. The way our self-concept is derived, in a sense, is that once we go above that six-figure number, so if I go above that $100,000, and let's say I made instead of making 100, I made $120,000. So I went over by 20%. Because of our self-concept of thinking that I went too far, I went above that number, I will engage in a term that is called throwaway behaviors. Meaning, because I hit the number and I went over it by a certain number or percentage, I will start to do things with that money that I normally wouldn't do. I'll start to give it away. I'll start to buy things for other people. I will start to do all those type of things because I went beyond my quote unquote self-concept. I went further than what I was supposed to go. Vice versa, if I came up short, and let's just say instead of making 100, I made 80. That following year, I'm going to do everything that I possibly can. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to be doing working extra hours, doing whatever it takes to get that number back up to that six figures, that 100,000. And so that's part of your self-concept. You get into a area and you feel comfortable in that area. And if you go too far above it, you'll get rid of the money. And if you go too far below it, you'll work like hell to get back up to that location again. This is why when I was working in an institutional setting, when I counsel drug dealers and different things like that, they would have that self-concept issue going on with them as well. If they got too much money and you ask them what did they do with some of the money, a lot of times they'll say, oh, I paid so-and-so's rent. Or I bought so-and-so a washer and dryer. Oh, a friend of mine whose family was on some hard times, I gave them money. They throw away the money because they have went so far beyond that self-concept that they don't know what to do with the money. They start buying things that have no value. And this is spreads throughout our community. Same thing with athletes. You ever hear that expression, or a certain percentage of athletes will go bankrupt after they stop playing for 5 years? The number used to be a lot higher. Now it's getting a little bit lower because they're getting a lot of financial education. Some are getting more financial education, but that used to happen quite a bit. And what happens with athletes, it's even worse because it's almost like it's on steroids. And the reason why is because they went from having no money at all to a bunch of money, essentially overnight. It's almost like they hit lotto or Powerball, some number, mega millions. And it's because, and they get so far out of that self-concept area, they're so far, they start throwing that money away. They start giving it away. Start doing all kinds of things with the money. Going in clubs, throwing money in the air. They are so far from where they used to be, they almost feel guilty that they have that much money. And this type of behavior is what could puts them, a lot of times they'll be bankrupt when they stop playing after a certain period of time. Not realizing that this money that they're making, they may only make it for a 5 or 10 year period, and then they're going to have to live the rest of their lives on what's left or whatever they invest. So that's the danger. That's the danger of this consumption class. A lot of times, all these different things. I talked to a woman not too long ago, and she told me that she spends, somewhere between $1,000, sometimes $1,500 on wigs. Like, really, that much? I didn't even know they cost that much. But yes, this is when I say beauty products. Spending all of this money, and for what? For what? Women, a little secret, and I don't know if y'all aware of this or not. Men, we like y'all natural. Natural hair, natural face, natural looks. We like natural. So I don't know who you're buying that for. Maybe you're buying it for yourself. Maybe you're trying to compete with other girls. I don't know. Other women. But men like natural women. You don't have to have your hair going down your back. You don't have to have all of that. But for some reason, I think you do. And it's costing you a whole bunch of money. And so that's why some of the women are talking sometimes like this, where they want a man making all that money, because they're thinking about lifestyle. I need to have my money to buy a lot of these things, such as these beauty products, such as the different things that I want that will make me feel good in the moment. And it's causing the marriage rate to drop, because a lot of men they're just falling out of the dating scene. They're not even playing the game anymore. So something is going to have to give here. We're going to have to stop doing this, because we can't continue to play this game where one group of people wants these higher end things. They only are chasing after a small percentage of men. They're not going to get them, and then they're going to be stuck. So we're going to have to come up with a different philosophy or a different strategy, on how to do this. The area I want to get into just here at the end here, as we getting ready to wrap up here in a minute, is how do we stop this? How do we stop this from happening? This being these consumers, these overconsumers, having these gigantic car payments. I think the average car payment right now is over $700 a month. $700 a month for the average new car payment. I think the used car payment is $530 or some number around that area there. The length of time that we're financing cars is going up. 84 months, 7 years. I think the average is 68 months for most cars, which is over 5.5 years. But some people are going all the way out to 84 months to finance these cars so that they can look the part. Again, it's that self-concept. So what can we do to stop this from happening? There's a variety of things that we can do. This is a generational thing. So it might be too late per se, not to stop making these frivolous purchases, but for us building up our net worth and different things like that for people in my age group. Not necessarily, I won't use the word too late, but you're going to have to work really, really hard to get to a reasonable point at this stage. Because once you get 50 years old and up, if you invest it properly, one of those dollars could turn into two, maybe three by the time you reach retirement age. But that's probably the best you're going to get. So you're going to have to save more versus if you had to start at, say, 10 years earlier, where that number would have been 1 out of 5, maybe 1 out of 6. Still not too late. But again, you're at a disadvantage to an extent. But you can teach your children. You can teach your children. And one of the first things you can do with your children on an educational level is try to see if you can get them in some of the more advanced placement type classes. I mean, that definitely will help. Not all kids get in there, but it preps them for college, and for two, these things that we're talking about, it curtails a lot of that because they're not necessarily they're not hanging around some of the same kids who are really caught up in the clothes and cars and all those material type items. So that's one thing that you can do to stop it from spreading from one generation to the other. Another thing you can do is read. Consistently reading. And what I'm getting at with that is majority of people who are upper middle class or rich tend to read about a book or so a month. And the books that they tend to read tend to be motivational type books, self-help, or business. Now, some people will say, I don't have that much time to read. I'm very, very busy. I get that. Listening to shows like this, which is considered an educational show or self-improvement show, and a podcast just driving to work, that could help. Those types of shows can help. All of the other shows similar to this, finance shows can help. Entrepreneurial type podcast type shows can help you. At least you're getting the information somewhere and it's coming in. That's what we're talking about. Read. If you're not reading, at least listen in your car. Get some of these information. There's audiobooks. There's all different kinds of ways you can get this information to help you become better at becoming an investor versus a quote unquote consumer. The other thing we can talk about is we don't need to be keeping score with our cars or clothes. Because here's a sad statistic reality-wise. A majority of Black men who will be 65 and older have incomes below $50,000 a year. And if we were to go back to right after the Great Recession in 2009, 35% of African Americans had no wealth at all or were in debt in 2009. And that was 15 years ago. And some people saying, but it takes so long sometimes to get out of these holes. And we end up, we're so far behind that we end up playing catch up. And a lot of times we're running around and it's just too late. It's hard for us to recoup from those situations. So we have to look at that. And we have to look at that. And how can we stop this from happening? One is starting with our children, teaching them about financial literacy. If you don't know, bring them to a class that you can go to. There's a lot of them within your community. Don't try and keep score by buying cars and clothes. Read. Consistently reading will help you. You've heard me on this show say before, and it's not my quote. This is from the late Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's business partner. He said the hardest thing to do is save $100,000. And he said after that, it becomes a cakewalk, which is true, because then the money starts to multiply faster. It's what they call the snowball effect. So these are some of the things that you can take into consideration when you're going forward. When I said before that we stress marriage on the show, I'm not stressing it because I'm sitting up here telling people it's a recommendation. You don't have to do it. You can stay single your whole life. There's no one forcing you to do anything, really. What the reasoning is because generally speaking, married couples' incomes tend to be higher. They tend to live longer. They tend to have better health. They tend to suffer less violence and live in less poverty. Those are very key indicators of being married. And so that's the reasons why we put such an emphasis, or, we talk about it on the show. Again, we're not telling you have to do it. It's just a recommendation, just for your own personal health and wealth. It's literally boils down to those two things. So it's something that you should take into consideration at some point in your life, whether it's, as you get older, someone's going to have to take care of you at some point, it's good to be in a situation to where you have a spouse who's going to, help you go along the way in your journey through this thing called life. Now, there's a book called The Wealth Choice, and it talks about 9 disciplines of Black millionaires. I am not going to go through all 9 of them just due to time, but I will mention a couple of them. Just a couple of them. And one of them is just simply have a strong work ethic. Have a very strong work ethic. And that means that as you're accumulating and you're in that accumulation phase of investing, put as much as you can in, live on the least amount that you can, be somewhat frugal. You don't have to be really a penny pincher type person, but be frugal. Don't overdo it. Don't overspend. All of that will help you because that money will start to multiply and grow. And the earlier you start, the better. So if you start at 18, 19, 20 years old, 21 years old, it becomes so much easier to save versus if you wait till later. The other thing is failure is never fatal. It's a down payment for success. You're going to fail quite a few times before you get it right. But once you get it right, everything will start. You'll look back on the whole situation and laugh. So that's very, very important to consider. Don't get caught up in the failure aspect of it. If it doesn't work, you fail, you just try again. And as you learn from the failures, you get better. And like I said, there's a bunch more. There's about 7 or 8 more, but I'm not going to go through every single one. Maybe I'll do one more before we wrap up. And it says savings. And according to the statistics from way back when, the book was written about maybe 10 years ago, says about 89% of the U.S. population are 4 paychecks away from disaster. And almost one half of African Americans will retire on $900 a month. So think about those numbers as you go forward. That's why it's so important. And if you think about it, think about when I was telling the story about the woman with the wig, think about how much money you would have had if you would have just saved that money at that point versus buying all of those wigs. And what would have been the outcome of your situation in the future? Well, we are about to wrap up. And like I said earlier, I want to say thank you to the audience for continuing to support this humble podcast. We're trying to do some new things here. I'm having a little bit of issues with getting the video right, with bringing on guests. So we're working on that because they changed the format of the software that I use. And so I'm trying to figure out how that all works. And once that gets going, we'll start having the guests again as far as being on video. There's a YouTube channel. It's called the Men, Money, and Marriage Hour. And we're starting to post some of the videos and clips on that particular YouTube channel. Like and subscribe that YouTube channel. That really helps us get a little bit further on in the algorithm. We also have the Instagram page, the 313 Men, Money, Marriage, all one word. There are clips from the show. Pictures of previous guests are on that particular Instagram page. And there's always a link in the show notes for the website. Click on the website, and the link in that show notes go on the website. You can get on the email list, variety of different things you can do. And again, all that does is help the show. There is a Cash App donation if you want to make one. It is the $114 Johnson. Every little bit helps. Like I said, I use that money most of the time to just upgrade the equipment and make the show a better sounding show, better visual show. And so we're doing that with certain things with clips where we can, outsource some of the, the clips there and have someone doing for us where they put more effects and everything like that on it and makes it just look more professional than what I can do. And that's what we do with that. So that's what the money goes to. So if you ever do want to make a donation to the show, you can through that Cash App. So with that being said, we will be back next week with a brand new episode. And until we meet again, we are...